Hello everyone, my name is CA Dhanuka and I would be taking you through the answer scheme of business and commercial knowledge. Business and commercial knowledge is part B or part 2 of your paper number 4 CA Foundation exam. This exam was conducted by ICI on 14th of December 2020. Since this happens to be a multiple choice question based exam, the students do not get question papers for the subject. However, based on memory, whatever BEI could retrieve, questions from our students, these questions have been accumulated here and we would be discussing those. So I repeat again, this entire discussion is happening on set of questions that have been retrieved based on memory of students. So there might be some more questions or there might be some other choices for a particular given question, but more or less this was the paper, right? Let's get started with the very first question. I have segregated these questions based on the chapters. So starting with chapter number 1, which is your introduction to business and commercial knowledge. The first question is, which of the following is not an economic activity? Now, we all know that economic activity is one that is conducted with the intention of making money, or there is an economic intention, right? So let us evaluate these options and check which of these activities do not have an engagement of, or a motive of economic intention, right? The first one is landowner compensate the tiller of land in the form of good grain. So there's a clear compensation here. Tiller of land. So somebody is farming in your land and you pay him either in cash or in form of wood grain. So the tiller or the farmer is working for an economic motive on your land. So this is an economic activity. The second one, doctor consulting his own family. Now, we all know that when we visit a doctor, we definitely pay fees to him, right? The consultation charges. But when he is consulting his own family, right, when he is rendering the same services to his own family members, he's not doing this with the expectation of earning an economic reward, but he's doing this out of love and care because he's genuinely interested in the well-being of his family. So we have clearly arrived at the answer. Doctor consulting his own family would be the answer here, because this is not an economic activity, right? Online teaching, of course, when professors teach you online, they charge you fees, so there is economic intention. Consumption of food items, we have studied this. Consumption is part of economic activity. Moving on to the second question. Intellectual property rights and copyrights is an example of which of the following key factor of Pestle matrix. Now we know that Pestle has political, environmental, social, technological, legal and economic aspects. So intellectual property rights and copyrights is something to do with your innovation in technology. So the answer here would be technological factor, right? Moving on to the third question. According to Income Tax Act, which of the following cannot be a source of income for HUF? Now we know that Hindu undivided family is in the structure of a family business, right? So in this you have Karta and co-partner. Any income that these guys derive from the family business will be taxed in the income tax under the head of business and profession. They can definitely have income from house property. Let's say the HUF family has another vacant property and they let it out. They can definitely have house property income. They can also have income from other sources based on, say, fixed deposit investments or post office savings. All those incomes will be taxed here. However, a HUF business cannot pay salary to its own people, to a co-partner, and I mean, of course, they can definitely pay salary out of business profits, but when it comes to taxability under the Income Tax Act, it would always be taxed under income from business and profession. So income from salary or the salary head is not applicable to a HUF business, right? Let's go to the fourth question, which is, what is a popular psychological motive in case of profession as an economic occupation? We know the different types of economic occupation. You have business, employment, profession. So profession, there's definitely a source of livelihood. They are members of a professional body. There's an economic achievement. They make money. But the popular psychological motive which people or generally the society sees is that professions are meant to render services to their clients, right? So here the answer would be A. Limited liability partnership is dash. Options are non-mutual agency, social and environment concern, public sector, hybrid form of business and organization. There is definitely a mutual agency in case of limited liability partnership, right? Because the acts of one partner binds the other than one particular clause which we have discussed, which is if there was a fraudulent intention, right? Social environmental concern, not necessary. It is not a public sector because it is closely held by only limited partners in the partnership firm. We know that limited liability partnership firm is a hybrid form of business organization because it gives dual benefits of a partnership firm as well as some additional benefits of a corporate like structure. That is why we call this as a hybrid form of business organization. So B would be your answer here. Sixth, DASH is a framework for macro environmental analysis. I don't think we know the option A here. Political, social are part of PESTEL, so the answer here would be PESTEL. Pretty simple. Perpetual succession indicates. Perpetual succession is something which goes on forever. Registration of partnership firm is compulsory. That's not the answer. Limited scope of rising funds. No. Separate legal entity, separate from its members. Okay. Liability of the partners is limited to his contribution to capital. That is the limited liability clause, right? And the first one is the mandatory registration. But the separate legal entity and separate from its members, in case of corporates, we know that a company will continue irrespective of whether the members are alive or not. That is why a company will always have a perpetual succession unless a winding up is initiated on the company, right? So the answer to this question here would be C. Which of the following is the recently introduced form of business organization in India via the Companies Act 2013? LLP, limited liability partnership, has been there before 2013. Sole proprietorship, you have no act guiding this. Private limited company is guided by the Companies Act. Private limited company form of business organization was there even in the prior act of Companies Act 1956. So the new form of business organization that was introduced in Companies Act 2013 was a one-person company. Yeah. Moving on to business environment. Which of the following is not an example of socio-cultural environment, right? Socio-cultural environment. Which of them is not an example? So three of these options must be a socio-cultural environment and one of them would not be. The role of women in society talks about, how women are leading the society, maybe in, in managing household, be it business sector, be it into employment. Family structure, the entire shift from, joint families to nuclear family, that is a social shift. Educational levels, what is the level of education in the society, right? What percentage of your population is educated? So that talks about society. Rising income, so the rising income, I think this should have been rising income. The rising income level is not a socio-cultural environment, but this is more of a demographic assessment of your population to assess as to how can you segment your population into different income classes. So this would not be a socio-cultural environment, and hence this happens to be the right answer for question number 9. Question number 10. Factors like trends, events of different interest groups are needed to be considered in. So here, that environmental analysis had 4 different, factors which could trigger environmental analysis. Those were your trends, events, you had issues and expectations, right? So the answer here would be environmental analysis. Which of the following is not an important characteristic of business environment? Image building is a characteristic of business environment. We have discussed an example during the class that how captive consumption leads to image building of the company, right? Giving direction for shrinking, continuous learning because environment changes, so the company has to adopt to the changing environment, so they learn a lot in this process. Opportunities and threats are definitely part of the environment. Giving direction for shrinking, no, the correct characteristic is giving direction for growth, right? Not for shrinking. ABC company is aiming towards joint venture and partnership with other firms to manage uncertainty. This is an example of. So ABC company has foreseen some sort of uncertainty, right? They're not sure what's going to happen, and they have perhaps decided that they would not be able to fight this alone, right? So they're taking help of certain joint ventures and partnership with other companies or other entities. So since they're coming together to fight this particular uncertainty, this would be a collective response, right? It is not a competitive response because they're not trying to get a competitive advantage over their peers. It is not an administrative response because they haven't made any changes internally. Same applies for microenvironmental response. They haven't changed anything in their microenvironment, right? So A would be the answer here. Moving on to the next chapter, which is business organizations. Who has a vision to attain the world-class excellency by demonstrating value-added products to customers? Now this has to be purely based on your ability to recall the factual information, and this vision statement belongs to Bajaj Auto Limited. I don't see any further scope of discussion in question number 13. Which of the following is a multinational financial service corporation? We know that IBM Corporation is into IT, Walmart is into multi-brand retailing, Microsoft Corporation is into, again, information technology, American Express is only a financial services. We know that it's an international bank. So D would be the answer here. In 1981, 7 engineers in Pune founded the following company: L&T, Infosys, Wipro, TCS. We know Infosys is the answer here. Though Infosys is headquartered in Bangalore right now, we have discussed the origin of this company and how it started in Pune. Which of the following company ranked first in Fortune 500 company list 2019? Again, a factual question. So the answer here is Walmart, right? To help individuals and businesses realize their full potential is the vision of, again, this is purely based on memory. You'll have to remember these facts. So the answer here is Microsoft. Let's come to common business terminologies. A security which has a solid record of dividend payments and offer the dividend higher than the common stock. So we've discussed this in the finance terminologies of chapter number 6. A hedge, we know that hedge is basically action taken to mitigate your potential risk. Holding period is if I buy a security today and if I sell it after a month, 1 month is my holding period. Index is a representation of the market constituting the topmost securities based on different methods of calculation. So index is not an answer here. Income stock justifies the question asked. So this is a stock which has a solid record of high dividend payments, and they generally pay dividends at a rate higher than its peer groups, right? Above the balance available in the account of the payer is called. So basically the question is, if there's any balance that you could withdraw over and above the balance in your account, what is that called? We know that it would be overdraft. Maturity is basically the end date of a particular certificate of deposit or fixed deposit. Market value is the value assessed by the open market for a particular security or an underlying asset. Mortgage is basically your availing of loan facilities for your house, property, or land, right? So A would be the answer here. The effect of change in price will have on customers is what happens when you change price. How do you think the customers respond to this? So basically they will stop demanding your product, or the demand is likely to fall. So the answer would be price sensitivity. Price discrimination is when I sell the same product at 2 different places for 2 different prices, right? Let's say selling the same bottle of water, selling the same bottle of water, say in a retail store for $10. Perhaps you might sell at a higher price at a railway station or at the airport, right? So that's price discrimination. Price skimming is when I charge higher prices initially in the launch of the product to recover the excessive R&D cost that was spent on development of the product. So and later on I reduce the prices so that initially I'm able to skim off the market by charging them a higher price. Preemptive pricing is a very competitive pricing where I ensure that I discourage other participants from entering the market, or I would want to boost the sale of my new product. So I would like to charge them a price which might be perhaps lower than even my manufacturing cost. But the idea is to just boost the market in its launch days, right? So the answer here would be C. A strongly motivated and long-standing decision of the customer to purchase a particular product or service is referred as a strongly motivated and long-standing decision. That means this is well planned in advance. The person, the customer, he or she knows that he or she would buy only this particular product, and this happens only when you're very loyal to a particular brand, right? Because you know that, say, I'm always going to buy Nike, right? So I'm loyal to the Nike brand. So the answer here would be C. Buying behavior is when you haven't decided what you're going to buy, but this is a thought process that goes in the brain of the buyer when he is at the shop, or when he is browsing in terms of e-commerce, the thought process that he goes and what leads him to make a decision. So that is buying behavior. Brand recognition is whether I'm aware of a particular brand or not, and customer satisfaction is whether the product meets my expectation. So A, B, and D would not be the answer, and C is the answer here. Question 22. Dash is a measurement of relationship between stock price of any particular stock and the movement of whole market. Let's look at the option. Call option, bid and offer, beta, break-even point. Call option is one of the options where I have a right to buy the underlying asset at a particular price, called as the exercise price. So, sorry, this is not the answer. Bid and offer is a price quotation format where I have a buying price and I have a selling price. Beta is the relationship of the stock, right? Beta, I've taught this in class earlier. Beta is the relationship, or it is the sensitivity of a stock's price in relation to the market's price, right? So beta is going to be the answer here. We have discussed beta again during class time. Break-even point is when I make just enough sale where I reach a point of no profit, no loss. That is a break-even point. So the answer for this question would be beta. Next is bid. Bid. So we remember bid and ask rate, right? So let us say the bid and ask rate happens to be 10/11. So 10 happens to be the bid rate and 11 happens to be the ask rate, right? So they're asking you what would be bid. So can I say that bid is the price? Bid means buy and ask refers to sell, right? So I have to look for those options which has buy involved in this. So here, lowest value which the seller is willing to sell, this will be wrong. Highest value which the seller is willing to sell, again this would be wrong. Lowest value which the buyer is willing to pay, and highest value which the buyer is willing to pay. So my answer has to be one amongst B or D. So when I say 10, that means the dealer would buy this particular product from you at 10. So this is the maximum price he is willing to pay, right? He will not pay you anything more than this. So I cannot say that this is the lowest value which I am willing to pay. This is the highest value, right? So the answer here is going to be B. I repeat, in case of bid and ask, this is the highest value that the dealer is willing to pay, right? And ask would be the lowest value. Ask would be the lowest value which the seller is willing to sell at. He will sell you anything at 11 and above, right? Okay, so B would be the answer there. Moving on to the next chapter, which is government policies facilitating business. Question number 24. Government keeps hold of responsibility and private enterprise handle fully or partly the delivery of product and services. Such type of concept of privatization is known as. So here the government has responsibility and private enterprise had fully and private enterprise is handled with full or partial responsibility of delivering the goods, right? So in this case, the ownership structure does not change. The government is still accountable for its organization. So the government has merely delegated one of these business activities to a private participant. So this would be a delegation. The formation of National Skills Development Corporation is an example of which of the following type of public policy. We know that National Skills Development Corporation, the government facilitates, the youth of the country and other interested people to acquire certain skills which will help them get vocational training, and they would be able to start a small industry or a small scale industry, or get some sort of self occupation, right? So what type of policy would that be? It's not restrictive because I'm not trying to restrict anything. Social, there's no such policy called a social policy. We have studied this in the subject. All the policies designed for public are ideally social policies. Facilitating, since I'm providing a facility of people to get vocational training and getting skills from this particular scheme, so this would be a facilitating policy. Again, I'm not trying to regulate anything, and hence it would not be a regulatory policy. So facilitating would be the answer for question number 25. Question 26. Organizing of immunization camps by government is an example of which policy? I mean, this is a very relevant question in times of pandemic, right? Let's say the vaccines are out, and once the government decides to immunize everybody by giving doses of vaccine, it will not be a restrictive policy, it will not be a social policy, it would be a distributive policy because I'm distributing vaccines. Similarly, if I have an immunization camp, if I'm giving certain doses, I'm essentially distributing them to people in the country. So it would be a distributive policy. Taking off, this would be taking double F, taking off restrictions in exports and imports of goods is. So I'm basically freeing something, right? I'm removing certain restrictions. Removing of restrictions is nothing but liberalization, giving more liberty for free trade of goods amongst international traders. Privatization, no. Globalization, socialization, no. 27. Gradual decrease in government command and control over economic policies is called when the government stops interfering and it reduces its control over economic policies, right? If they hand over things to private companies, then you would have selected the answer is privatization, right? There's nothing called a socialization. LPG were the only three buckets of 1991 reforms. So the answer here would be liberalization because government is relaxing some more norms and government has less of interference, right? Question 29. Selling of a portion of ownership from public enterprise to private parties is called. Now, when I sell a portion of ownership from public enterprise to private party, that means I'm not selling the entire entity. I'm either selling certain assets or one of the part of the business, right? So that would be disinvestment. Delegation is not the answer. There's nothing called as deregulation. It doesn't happen to be divestment because in case of divestment, I completely withdraw an entity with the intention of because let's say this particular entity is making losses, and I would want to increase the efficiency or to improvise the return on investment. Since that is not the objective here, the answer would be disinvestment. In which of the following FDI is prohibited under both the government route as well as automatic route, right? So we know that for FDI there are two different routes where the government has given list of businesses where the people from outside India can come into India and start business without taking government's approval. That would be the automatic route. But if the business happens to be one which is not there in the automatic approval route list, will have to seek direct permission from the government. However, there's also another list which has certain businesses or certain areas in which FDI is prohibited, and one such item happens to be atomic energy. Of course, keeping in mind the safety of the people, government would not allow FDI whether through government route or the automatic route. Government route is also called as approval route, right? Solar energy, wind energy, biomass energy, FDI is definitely permitted. Organizations facilitating business. Controller of capital issues was replaced by which of the following regulatory authority? So we know that before SEBI we had something called as controller of capital issues because that came from what do you call Capital Issues Control Act of 1947, if I'm not wrong. That was the year this body was established, CCI, and later once SEBI came into picture, CCI was repealed. So SEBI would be the answer here. Which of the following is not an objective of establishing the Competition Commission of India? Competition Commission of India. Let's look at the options. To prevent practices having adverse effect on competition, definitely this is an objective. To preserve and sustain competition in markets, yes. If you guys remember, the intention of Competition Commission of India is to not vanish or not to fade away competition, but to maintain healthy and sustain competition in the markets, right? To protect the interest of the customers, yes, that's the end goal. To ensure restriction of trade carried on by other participants in markets, no. So this is not an objective and hence this is an answer. In fact, such restrictive trade practices are prohibited under the Competition Commission. SEBI was set up to regulate the dash insurance market, security market, money market, capital market. Now we know that insurance market is regulated by Insurance Regulatory and Development Authority of India, so this is not the answer. There's nothing called a security market, right? You have money market and capital market. Money market is your market for short-term borrowing or lending, generally maturing within a year's time, and anything above that goes to capital market. So SEBI regulates the capital market, which has both primary and secondary, right? Starting from your IPOs to subsequent trading of stocks on the markets. Money market generally has participants as monetary institutions and banks, which is largely regulated by RBI. So D, capital market, would be the answer here. Which of the following is not a regulatory body? SIDBI, SEBI, RBI, CCI. SEBI regulates the capital market, RBI regulates the banks, CCI regulates competition in the country, right? So SIDBI is not a regulatory body. This is a funding institution, Small Industries Development Bank of India. This is a wholly owned subsidiary of IDBI, right? They promote small scale industry by funding them. So this is not a regulatory body. IRDAI full form. The full form of IRDAI, which I just mentioned above, is your Insurance Regulatory Development Authority of India. So the answer here would be C. The other options are wrong here. Which of the following financial institution is known for dealing in SHG bank linkage program? SHG stands for self-help group, right? NABARD, IRDAIs, SBI, SEBI. SBI State Bank of India, they have nothing to do here. SEBI regulates capital market, IRDI regulates and controls insurance market. NABARD, right? We know that NABARD is a bank that is linked with agriculture and rural development, and one such functions of NABARD is that they fund self-help groups which are generally formed by women in rural areas, and NABARD helps them by giving them facilities of microfinance, right? So NABARD would be the answer here. With that, we come to the end of questions that we were able to retrieve. I hope most of you got these answers right. The paper seems pretty easy, right? I wish everybody who's written the CA Foundation exam in December 2020 all the best. I wish everybody clears, and good luck.